industries with STEM and innovation opportunities galore. You will hear about new developments, activities, and companies in this growing ecosystem that bring together technology, sustainable energy and environments, as well as nature. Throughout the session, you may submit questions through the Q&A box on your Zoom screen, and following the presentation, we will answer as many of your questions as time allows. It is now my pleasure to introduce our guest speakers, Nancy Grden, who's the Associate Cronin. So if you could just please turn on your cameras and mics when I introduce you. He is the Executive Director of the Open Seas Technology Innovation Hub and Tempo, Business Creation, Incubation, and Acceleration at Old Dominion University. Matt Smith, who's the Director of Offshore Wind at the Hampton Roads Alliance, and Kevin Spears, who's the co-founder and CEO of Splik. So please join me in welcoming our presenters to REYES. Welcome, everyone. We're so glad to see you. I'll go ahead and let you take it from here.
Great. Well, thank you, Giovanna. And good morning, everyone. I guess it's morning, maybe afternoon in other places, but we are really excited to be here and share with you our excitement about maritime, offshore wind, and the really cool things happening for innovation and STEM. So what we thought we would do is each of us is going to give a little bit of background and talk about the opportunities that we see. We're going to certainly talk about our region here, Hampton Roads in Virginia. And obviously, as Giovanna said, we have a Q&A session as well. So Jerry, if you don't mind, if you could bring up our first. So again, this is our topic. And for those of you who are not from Hampton Roads, this is literally a real picture of our harbor here in Hampton Roads, Virginia. It's really exciting. You can see the port, you can see all of the opportunities. And what's exciting for us in the region, and as you'll see on the next slide, is we, of course, several of us represent Old Dominion University, and our university is actually playing a major role to really help lead some of the activities and innovation that are taking place, not only in our area here, but for the entire Commonwealth state of Virginia. And you may say, well, what's so exciting about what's happening here that's really generating all this interest in innovation and STEM? And as you'll see on the next slide, we are a really lucky region because we have so many assets. And literally, if it touches the water, it has something to do with maritime. So first of all, we have an amazing deep harbor here, right on the Atlantic Ocean. We have the world's largest Navy base and a very high concentration of Navy vessels. We do a lot of shipbuilding and ship repair here. We have a huge port, very well known internationally. A whole series of industries that relate, including cybersecurity, IT, alternative energy sources. Seeing a lot happening with transatlantic pipelines coming from Europe to here that's actually landing on our shores. A lot happening in unmanned systems. And many people don't know that we actually have Wallops, which is a facility of NASA here, and some JLab supercomputing. And then on top of it all, a brand new industry for offshore wind, and we'll talk more about that. So when you add it all up, all of these assets are coming together here in our region to create amazing opportunities for job growth, economic development, careers, training, and most of all, really does rely heavily on all the exciting areas that STEM offers in terms of the development and the support. So with that, I actually would like to turn to our first speaker, Jerry Cronin. And Jerry's going to talk a little bit about, these are some of the areas actually where we have STEM expertise in our region. And he's going to talk a little bit about specifically some of the things that his area, Open Seas, handles. So Jerry, over to you.
I'm now off mute. It is a pleasure to be here and to meet everybody, and I look forward to this session. A little bit about background of myself. I started in physics and computer science, so I am a big fan of science, technology, engineering, and math because it has informed everything I have done in my career. And I've done fisheries things, I've done business things, I've done training things, but the background provided to me, the discipline of science and the discipline of physics and math in particular, have really helped me greatly in my career do the things I have done. So I am a real fan of saying, you know, good for going after this field. The world needs more folks who think scientifically and think like engineers and mathematicians. A little bit about Open Seas. I always throw this picture up at the beginning of every Open Seas presentation I do. And if any of you have ever been over to Portugal, this is what I consider to be historically the world's first global maritime incubator. Started in the 1400s by Prince Henry of Portugal. And at that point in time, folks had not gone far in the world. There was nothing tying the whole world together. All the maps had blank spaces on them saying, here be dragons, that sort of thing. And Henry gathered map makers and astronomers, shipbuilders, think science, technology, and engineering, mathematics types, brought them all together. And the result was the creation of the Age of Discovery, which is what then created a maritime operation which spanned the entire world and tied it all together. It led to Portugal and Spain being, it kicked off them being very, very wealthy, and it drove a lot of innovation and a lot of business. So maritime, although people think of it sometimes as, oh, that's old stuff, maritime historically and now is driving a lot of innovation. So there's opportunities there. And that's what Open Seas is about. This is just what we do. Open Seas is about innovation. Our job is to work with industry, work with communities, work with entrepreneurs, all those sorts of folks to find what some of the tough problems are, and then get creative minds, which come from engineers, come from scientists, might come from artists. You never know where these things are going to come from, but put them through a process that then takes those ideas, solves those problems, but even more important than just solving the problem, then standing up an operation to do what you've just discovered and get it out into the world. Because if it just becomes a research paper that sits on a shelf, it's not providing the full value it can to the planet and to the people. So, if the sea level's coming up and you find a great way to adapt to something, having that report on the shelf is doing nobody any good. It needs to turn into an operation and get out to where it can help people. And that's what Open Seas is about. And as Nancy said, to us, maritime is anything that touches water. So you see down at the bottom, maritime, offshore wind, aquaculture and fisheries. Part of my background, I was a Coast Guard officer. One time I was one of the world's experts in fisheries enforcement. Fisheries are a place you can apply this stuff. And of course, climate change, coastal adaptation, those things that are hitting the coastlines pretty heavily. A large part of what we do is something we call a business opportunity dojo. If you're familiar with karate or martial arts, this allows you to deal with people with ideas at different levels. Some have businesses, some are really, really successful, some are just starting out, but the community learns from each other. And Kevin Spears, who I'm going to hand off to after this, their company Splice is one of the companies in the dojo. So we have community sessions, and then we have one-on-one work sessions. What this is, we use a process called lean startup. And as a physicist, I was really amazed when I started getting into training and organizational development that there's logic and structure in those things, just like there is in math or just like there is in science. Everything has order to it. And this is basically the process we follow when we're looking at that really great idea and saying, great idea. But the first thing you try to do is say, is there a business model? Is there some place in the world where this actually solves a problem that people are willing to pay for or put money against? Because if not, it's a great idea, but there's no business you can build around it. There's no way you can stand up the operation without some way to sustain it. That's the first part. And then once you get that done, then you go through the process of planning, figuring out what the financial requirements are, obtaining funding and all those things. But it all starts with going out and saying, hey, who has the problem? What are their problems? How do you solve them? And are we creating value when we solve them so you can create a business out of it? These are just some of the companies we have in the dojo. Prime 3, I need to change this out. Sorry, Kevin. Splice is a spinoff from Prime 3, but we have everybody from Sedena, which is our newest member, which is working with satellite communications, to Splice, which Kevin will talk about, which is supply chain software, even to plasma activated solutions, which looks like a way to make fish and things like that last longer in the supply chain, so you can get them to market and have more time to do that. We do a lot of projects with a number of different people. The people on the left, we help a thing called NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. We help them put together a global innovation competition. We're doing work for companies like Ferguson, which is a plumbing supply, but it's a global plumbing supply company. And they're dealing with sewer systems and clean water systems. The Port of Virginia, we've got Matt Smith on. We've joined up with them for something called the Offshore Wind Landing, which Matt will talk about. I've got a slide on it here, but I will more than happily let Matt go through the stuff there. We're doing a project where we're applying GIS, which is graphical information systems, to build a tool to help to decide where to put offshore wind energy so it doesn't interfere with commercial and military operations. And our big project we're working on right now is we're creating a test bed where people who have innovations and solutions can go and test those things, whether they be an unmanned vehicle, whether they be some software system or whatever, to help make the offshore wind industry do better and lower the price of energy. And last but not least, I always like to say, we are part of a big university. And I like to say that every college in the university, not only the STEM ones, but also things like English and history and places like that, all of them touch maritime. So regardless of the field you're going into, there is probably a maritime-oriented play there and an opportunity. And I'll just close out. I was in a session with a company called CMA CGM, one of the largest logistics and shipping companies in the world. And the chairman of their board looked around the room and said, who was formerly trained in logistics and shipping? What were your degrees? And nobody had a degree in that. They were all in things like engineering or math or history or whatever. So the maritime world takes in people from all over the place, and it's a great area to get involved. We're always looking for innovators. We're always looking for problems to solve. We're looking for organizations to work with and sponsor. And a big part of what we do also is looking for where the investments are going to come to make this work. So with that, I would like to hand it over to Kevin, and then at the end, looking forward to your questions.
Great, thanks, Jerry. I will throw up a couple slides. So my name is Kevin Spears. I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders of Splice. Splice is an integration platform for logistics. It's a cloud-based system that allows applications to talk to each other. And I'll get into that in a second, and I'll tell you a little bit more about Splice. I'm looking for sharing my screen. I guess there it is. Thank you. All right, I hope everybody can see that. So how do you become the CEO or a co-founder of a logistics company, software logistics company based in Norfolk, Virginia? Well, it's a bit of a route. I started my career at Procter & Gamble as a finance manager. And then got kind of ants in my pants and said, I want to go back to school and get into international business. So more into international business, not that P&G isn't one. And then went to Georgetown and got a master's degree in international business at the School of Foreign Service in a program that also bridged the business school. I went to a consulting firm called Avocent. And at first I'd worked with financial clients, and then started a practice helping supply chain and transportation companies doing everything from market analysis to mergers and acquisitions, and really started getting into a lot of the different sides of technology and helping some private equity companies acquire new technology, and that kind of started a spark for me. That got delayed a minute because I got into the maritime business and the supply chain and the supply chain practice. One of my clients was Maersk, and I got the opportunity to join them and was at Maersk for several years. And Maersk is the largest container shipping company in the world. And I did a whole bunch of things for Maersk. That's another story. But it got me, and it brought me to Norfolk. And once here, I was steeped into the maritime and shipping business. And along the way, met some people who introduced me to more people. That's another lesson learned about just continuing to try to expand your market or your network. And I met my fellow co-founder at Splice, and we started looking at this business and decided to push it through. So it's really my career is unique. Of course, we all will have unique careers, but I think it's a story of continuing to keep your options open and following something that's a passion. And mine was everything in kind of the international business realm. So let's talk about Splice for a second. So what is Splice all about? So let's think about we'll talk about the name. So Splice, splicing rope. When you have two pieces of rope that you want to connect together, you weave them together to splice them, right? And in doing so, you make them stronger. And you might even add a loop to it so that it adds some new utility or use. And that's what Splice does. Splice takes existing applications that don't talk well to each other and get them to talk. It does this by kind of bringing the language and the data that connects these applications. It kind of harmonizes it and translates it into common language so that they all can speak easily together. And this is a big problem in logistics and shipping and logistics. In some ways, in such a global business, the way data moves falls back to the lowest common denominator, which could be spreadsheets or email, and that's not very efficient. Meanwhile, you have tons of technology that is rapidly changing the landscape. And so you have acceleration on one side and things kind of static. Something has to bridge the two. And that's what Splice does. So let me give you an example. So I'll be really quick about this. This has to do with trucking. So think of a container gets dropped off at the port and somebody's got to come pick it up, right? But a port is a really busy place and you don't just drive in and ask for your container. You got to find out when it's available. You have to get a reservation so that you can come to the port. And if you're the company that's responsible for picking up that container, you probably have to check with your customer and your customer's customer. There's a lot of people involved, which is another reason why moving data and sharing data is so difficult. So the idea behind Splice is to remove all of the time that it takes to make this happen and make it a simpler process that moves quickly and efficiently. Now, this is only one use case, but there's a couple of things that really drive Splice. It's the fact that you're integrating applications, you're automating processes, and within Splice, there's a way to design your workflow. So there's a lot of elements that go into Splice, but it's actually a really simple application that is in a low-code environment, which means you don't have to be a programmer to use it. But if you had some programming skills, it's going to help you a lot. It's really designed for supply chain professionals or people in operations who understand the workflow, the process, and might need to change it on occasion. And this is where things get really interesting, because now you have Splice in the middle of a lot of different applications, a lot of different things that are taking place in the supply chain world. If you're connecting to a terminal operating system, which is the common term for software that manages container ports, and you might build that all the way back into, you know, an enterprise resource planning tool like SAP or Oracle. And now you're really connecting across a lot of different applications. So here are a couple other ideas on where Splice gets used. So it's in-transit visibility, that's being able to see where your cargo is at any time. Shipping containers is not like Amazon, where you can find out where your stuff is and know where it's going to arrive. It's not quite that good. It's getting there. But container yard management and all sorts of other sorts of notifications and ways to stay on top of things. So really, when you think about what is notable, what's going on here that is really interesting, one is that there's just a proliferation of applications that are being created, and Splice helps connect those. But there's a huge amount of digital transformation taking place, and it's a really exciting field where you're combining the most international of businesses in shipping with technology and also this maritime and shipping environment that has this long history. And it's really merging a lot of what is old and new together. And it makes it a very exciting business to be in. And it also makes Norfolk a great place to be in that business, with the port and the ecosystem of other companies. And as I talked about networking earlier, that is so important for any company and any person who's really trying to move their career forward. So I look forward to your questions about Splice or careers, and or how to think about how to move forward as you think about options. And I'll hand it over to Matt.
All right, thanks, Kevin. I'm gonna pull up my screen here and get going. All right, well, appreciate being able to talk with the group today. My name is Matt Smith. I'm the Director of Offshore Wind for the Hampton Roads Alliance, and I'll give you a little bit of background about me and the Alliance first. So the Alliance is a regional economic development organization that represents the Hampton Roads region of Virginia, and we focus on growing our economy through the industries that we have special ability in the region, and essentially the traded sectors of the economy of Hampton Roads. And one of those we feel like can be the offshore wind industry. So we've set up a special initiative to help develop the supply chain for offshore wind in Hampton Roads. So my background is actually not in STEM, it's in community development. I'm an urban planner by training, but have gotten into offshore wind through that avenue, and am certainly grateful for all the engineers and scientists that can actually enable these amazing structures, offshore wind turbines, to be constructed. So what I'll do today is talk to you a little bit about what's going on around offshore wind on the East Coast of the United States, and why we think it's such a potential game-changing industry for Hampton Roads. And then talk a little bit about what we've learned about jobs in the field. So really, this is a picture of the opportunity around offshore wind on the East Coast. This one you see on the left here is a nighttime map of the East Coast of the United States. And you can see that there are a lot of metropolitan areas that need a lot of power right along our coast. And then the middle picture is a map of the strength of wind off their coast. And So there's a lot of wind blowing out there that's really untapped right now for power generation potential. And then we have a shallow continental shelf along the East Coast that's well suited for the construction of offshore wind projects. So all these things have come together to make the East Coast of the United States one of the fastest growing and projected to be one of the largest offshore wind markets in the world. So like many countries around the world, states in the United States have set renewable energy goals and laws, and a lot of that is driving the development of offshore wind. And within these requirements, many states have carve-outs for offshore wind, where they're requiring generation of power from offshore wind along with other renewables. And for example, in the state of Virginia, a law was passed a couple years ago called the Virginia Clean Economy Act, and it requires Virginia to get 100% of its electricity from carbon-free sources by 2050. So, and very ambitious goal. And within that goal or law is the requirement to develop 5.2 gigawatts of offshore wind. And I'll talk about some of the initial project to meet that requirement in just a minute. So all of these things have added up to a pretty large project pipeline along the East Coast of the United States. You can see a map here basically from North Carolina up to Massachusetts, and there are around 20 offshore wind projects in some stage of development along the East Coast. And to put that in perspective, the power from these projects could power over 10 million homes. And if you're familiar, it's an example I use in the United States, but a famous power generation hydroelectric project is called the Hoover Dam. It's one of the largest in the country, and it produces 2 gigawatts of power. So we're essentially building 15 Hoover Dams off the coast of the United States. So that really has led to an incredible opportunity environmentally, but also in terms of economic development. Many studies have been done to estimate, what the impact of the industry is, but one from the American Wind Energy Association has estimated that it'll take $80 to $100 billion in capital investment and generate opportunity for over 80,000 workers, many of those with STEM credentials that are needed. So in Virginia, we think we have a number of advantages that Jerry and Nancy have talked about, where our maritime ecosystem has come together to really form a good foundation for the growth of the offshore wind industry. It needs, the port infrastructure that we have, the skilled maritime workforce, all of the terminal facilities, the shipbuilding industry that has a lot of overlap in terms of skill and capacity with offshore wind. So we really think that offshore wind can be really a fourth pillar of our maritime industrial base, along with the Navy, the Port of Virginia, and our shipbuilding and ship repair industry. So I'll get into a little bit more specifics about projects that are being developed off our coast, mainly talking about the Coastal Virginia Offshore Wind Project that's being developed by Dominion Energy. It's the largest offshore wind project that's being developed in the U.S. And is located about 27 miles off the coast of Virginia Beach here in Hampton Roads. So we've done some work to understand what the impact of this project and others, but particularly the Dominion project, will have on our economy. And we know that from an economic impact analysis, we understand and have estimated that this project will create about 900 jobs during the construction phase and over 1,000 jobs during the operations and maintenance phase. But we also know a lot about what types of jobs will be required to build this wind farm, and can use that as an example of what will be needed to build other wind farms along the coast of the U.S. And a study that we've commissioned has identified that there are 625 specific job roles in the construction, operations, and maintenance of an offshore wind farm, and 120 of those are unique to the industry. So this is really a new industry to the U.S. with a lot of opportunity for workers in a lot of different fields. But at a high level, we've identified certain types of workers or careers that will be needed to develop the industry, and you can see here that engineers and scientists are a big part of that. And one of the reasons we've developed this is to identify the types of workers, but also the training requirements for these types of workers. So we know that we as a region in Hampton Roads will have the workers needed to build out our projects and support the industry as a whole. So another important thing that we've done, we also need to know how many and when the jobs will be required. So you can see here, this is specific to that Dominion project, that the most jobs that will be needed are in skilled trades, and that's people like welders and electricians and fabricators. But we'll also see we need the third highest kind of level of job need will be engineers, and then there's a lower demand for scientists and other folks. So really a good opportunity for people that are have a background in science and engineering. And we've also done some work to understand when we'll need these jobs and how they're associated with different phases of the project and what type of job is associated with what phase. So again, this will really help us as a region trying to develop the workforce that we need to support the industry and make sure we have the training programs that schools like ODU, other schools that provide four-year educations or more career and technical oriented training. But just for an example here, you can see that scientists are predominantly needed during the project development phase. That's because of where a lot of the site assessment work is done for a project like this, where you understand the bathymetry and geotechnical and geophysical aspects of where you're going to locate an offshore wind farm. So really, we think we have a once in a generation opportunity to create a new workforce, and one that I think is we think and is required by the law that has enabled the project in Virginia to provide a lot of opportunity for minority and disadvantaged communities. So we're very excited about that opportunity. And Jerry mentioned that we have stood up what we're calling the Virginia Offshore Wind Landing, and this is kind of a co-working and networking space that exists physically and virtually to develop a cluster of offshore wind companies that can foster the growth of Hampton Roads as an innovation and supply chain hub for the industry. So Jerry and I work in this space a lot. We have companies that are developing offshore wind projects and also companies that are members of the landing that are going to be part of the supply chain that is developing and will be built out in the US. And so we're trying to facilitate connections between those companies and get them associated with Hampton Roads and connected to our broader maritime ecosystem. So you see my contact information here. You're welcome to get in touch with me if you have any questions. And I think since we have some time, I've been asked to play a video that ODU and the Department of Mines, Minerals, and Energy has developed. So I'm going to give it a shot here. It's always kind of some guesswork on Zoom whether we're going to be able to get the video to work, but bear with me for just a second here. Oops. So, let's see.
Hey, Matt. Right before you share it, when you click on the share screen, there's two buttons on the bottom of the pop-up window that you need to check for the audio to be shared. Okay. So you may stop sharing now and then click back on the sharing. And then, thank you. Oh, no problem. Before you share, just click those two check boxes on the bottom of that pop-up. All right, so I'm clicking the share button and then there are two check boxes. Sound. Got it. And then optimize video. Correct. All right. Thank you. So I'll just pause here to say, Kevin, can you hear me now? Yes, the audio can be heard from you and the video. You're fine. Okay, I'll let it play. Thanks. No problem.
2 centuries ago, in the California gold rush of the 1840s, American author Mark Twain said, During the gold rush, it's a good time to be in the pick and shovel business. A new gold rush is now taking place off the U.S. East Coast, where offshore wind prospectors have staked claims where they will invest $100 billion over the next 10 years. The largest announced investment to date is Dominion Energy's 2.6 gigawatt project off Virginia. Near where the first permanent English settlement in America was founded lies the Chesapeake Bay entrance and a complex of natural harbors and industrialized waterfront areas known as Hampton Roads.
We are starting with 2 turbines off of our coast. We hope to expand that to 2,600 megawatts of wind energy off of our shores.
We invite you to learn more about the advantages of this historic region for investing in the pick and shovel business of offshore wind. Hampton Roads is rich with abundant maritime assets. 4 Port of Virginia terminals. 4 commercial shipyards with large floating dry docks, and dozens of smaller ship repair and boat building facilities. Located in the central mid-Atlantic, Virginia is well positioned to be a supply chain hub that can receive, build, and deliver the largest offshore wind components to all existing U.S. East Coast lease areas. With ocean transport at 10 knots, Virginia-built components can reach any lease area or its marshaling port within a day and a half. The Port of Virginia routinely serves post-Panamax, ultra-large container vessels and is also accustomed to receiving and handling the large cranes that serve those vessels. The container cranes at Virginia International Gateway are of the same scale as offshore wind turbine foundations. It is thus easy to envision the port supplying American-made steel in the water for hundreds of offshore wind turbines up and down the U.S. East Coast. With upgrades now complete at the Port of Virginia's other container terminals, Portsmouth Marine Terminal is now being evaluated as a major offshore wind supply chain hub. It is the only terminal on the U.S. East Coast with sufficient land area to host fabrication and assembly of all offshore wind components. Each eastern state has its own rich maritime heritage, with waterborne commerce dating back to the colonial era. But in modern times, Virginia has more full-time shipyard workers than all other mid-Atlantic states combined. Virginia also is home to more than 500,000 workforce-ready veterans who have rotated out of military service and thus well-suited for new careers in offshore wind.
And we are preparing to submit a lease application to secure locations in federal waters now for wind energy research and testing and environmental data gathering that will move offshore development of wind resources forward more quickly. Virginia recently collaborated with Dominion Energy and Ørsted to allow for construction of 2 6-megawatt wind turbines off of our coast. This will be the first deployment of commercial-scale turbines in federal waters.
With the port's unique waterfront properties, Virginia's unparalleled shipbuilding workforce, and Hampton Roads' deep, wide channels with unlimited air clearance, all the way to the open sea, Virginia is unmatched in its offshore wind manufacturing potential. From corner office, to shop floor, to research lab, to vessel deck plates, Virginia is all in for offshore wind.
All right, thank you for that opportunity, and I'm happy to take questions when the time is appropriate.
Well, thank you, Matt. That was really exciting, and maybe just to put some personal touches, I certainly have had the opportunity to see the 2 test turbines off the coast, and I assume you've been able to actually see it as well.
I have. Yeah, it's really amazing to be out there and see something as tall as the Washington Monument out there spinning and delivering. And they are delivering power to Virginia homes right now.
Yeah, and what's remarkable is when you're on the coast, you cannot see them. So you literally, if you're standing on the shore in Virginia Beach and you look out towards the ocean, you literally can't see them. It's only until you're, what, 27 miles out that you appear. So anyway, there are two out there to actually begin to see, and they're in a test situation. So this is obviously a live situation for the Commonwealth. So at this stage, we're happy to take any comments or questions from the audience. So Kevin and Jerry, if you guys want to turn your cameras on, and maybe to start, you know, obviously you've each talked about some really exciting opportunities. Hopefully you can see why we are all in, if you will, as that video says, for not only offshore wind, but all the maritime opportunities. So maybe you guys could comment on some of the specific developments you see, how someone who's interested in this career path or getting involved might actually get involved with some of these activities.
Maybe I can start with a couple of examples. So last year, actually, the state of Virginia set up something called the Mid-Atlantic Maritime Alliance for offshore wind training. So it is a consortium of, at this point, community colleges that offer training associated with offshore wind from a career standpoint to specific offshore wind training. So that's a way you could get into the kind of, I would say, the nuts and bolts aspect of offshore wind. And then obviously there are a high need for skilled positions in the offshore wind industry as well, where you could take advantage of programs at a lot of the schools in Virginia that offer those, like ODU does, and Virginia Tech and the University of Virginia.
I would just make note to all the businesses that are expanding in the region. There have been some pretty notable announcements recently. I guess one in container shipping is that CGM, the French container line, which has had a presence in the region for, I think, about 20 years, is expanding in Norfolk and adding an innovation center in Arlington, Virginia, which is just outside of Washington. But there are tons of other ways to get into the business. If it's more of a desk job, or if, you know, or being an agent where you actually are getting on ships because of the amount of vessels that come through the area. There's always different sorts of opportunities that exist to get inside the business. From a innovation company and startup, there's so much going on in terms of say open seas, but there are new incubators opening up in the area. There is a new group called the Norfolk Innovation Corridor that's all about creating this sort of environment and culture to spawn more entrepreneurship and more industry, more companies in the area. So there's just so much happening right here that I think it's going to create tons of opportunities in the very near term.
Yeah, and I would say, you know, think of the things you're studying. If you're doing the engineering stuff, you might be studying structural engineering or mechanical, civil, even power type things. In offshore, for example, every single one of those disciplines, those areas has a play. The structural engineers are looking how to make those bases more sturdy. If you're a naval architect, you might be looking at better ways of holding the ships in position as they're transferring really, really heavy things in an ocean that's rocking back and forth. If you're a mathematician, for example, our National Renewable Energy Lab just put out a call for hiring folks who are looking at what they're considering the next power coming off the shore, which is sort of wave energy and current energy of the flows. So you need mathematicians to model all those those things to figure out how much power could you possibly get out of there. So everything has its play. And then the question is, while you're studying, while you're investigating, how do you get involved? Well, Kevin brought up CMA, CGM, shipping companies. They're always looking for interns. So, there's opportunities there. You go into the shipping companies in the city and say, hey, I'd like to intern for a while to get a flavor there. If you're going to a university, find the professors who are doing work in these areas that you're interested in. And typically they have projects. They can become mentors. They can do those type of bits, or even down to the point of, I've been on boats before. Boats need crews, getting out on the water. There's opportunities for doing that type of thing in between breaks in school or whatever. So, the world's full of opportunities. No matter what you're doing, you can apply it here. It's going out and doing it. But if you look, you'll find them.
Yeah, and Jerry, you mentioned this earlier, and it's actually a field open to literally every discipline. So you mentioned many of the engineering and math, but think about cybersecurity, urban planning, and looking at economic development and those kind of impacts, arts and letters and doing mapping and spatial design. I mean, there really is something for everybody, if you will. And obviously the whole idea of having sustainability of all these functions is really important. So I think that's what's really amazing, is it really brings together, I think, so many disciplines, maybe in a way that we haven't thought about before.
Yeah. And even if you go into communications or something like that,
yeah,
those things are key in offshore wind. Matt will tell you, and folks involved in offshore wind, some of it's the engineering, but some of it's also technical communications.
Yeah.
How does somebody who understands enough about the science and in engineering, but is then able to communicate that to the public and the politicians who you need to support these efforts to make them work? So you could call it, STEM provides you with sort of technical literacy and math literacy. So you're able to speak about things. Even if you end up being a communications director somewhere, you have that grounding and that background that you can talk science or you can talk engineering and almost translate between two populations that sometimes, have trouble understanding each other.
No doubt, Jerry. I go back to that statistic I provided about the number of unique job roles that are in offshore wind. And there are those hardcore disciplines of engineering, but yeah, a lot of the work that is being done is there's work around stakeholder engagement. You have to have community buy-in, and you have to be able to communicate the benefits of these projects to others. And then there's a number of things you just don't think about. An offshore wind project as a piece of critical infrastructure. And so we've seen, the need to protect that critical infrastructure and be able to work with big data securely to make sure that it's online. And then an example that a colleague of mine uses, there will be an elevator in each of these offshore wind turbines. And so you need somebody that is able to do elevator repair 27 miles offshore in a 180-story offshore wind turbine. So just myriad opportunities in the industry that tie a lot of disciplines together.
And of course, water connects us all. So all of the international opportunities that present themselves by being involved in this field, it's not just Norfolk, Virginia. It literally is international. So I think that's the other really, really cool thing about it.
Yeah.
Giovanna, I'm going to ask you if there are any questions you see in the chat that you would care to share with us.
No, there's no new questions. I did have one for you, and that is, I wanted to get your advice for people who are watching today and are interested in pursuing this field, your encouragement on the importance of starting locally where they are, right? Because here in Norfolk, we have been innovating in the maritime industry, but now we're being consulted by other countries who want to learn from what we have discovered here and what we have put in place. Can you speak about some of those innovations that students can start working on where they are, and then perhaps one day they will become global?
Well, I will, I'll talk a little bit about just kind of the software side. Software is just easily transmittable, right? Easily moved internationally and traded. And we could start our business anywhere. We could be anywhere. We've actually proven that, as we all have over the last year and a half. But you do need to start you do want to be in a place where you are around the right people, really. It comes down to being, the people, the culture that helps you, that is the right place for your business, the right place for yourself, that inspires you and wants you to really strive. You get up each day and you're excited about going to work. I'm sure we've had days where we're really excited to get up and go, and other days where we're not. But if 9 out of 10 you're ready to go, that's pretty great. And that comes down to the people you're with and those who kind of inspire you to do things a little bit better.
Yeah, and I would add on top of that, if you're looking for folks who are inspiring. Most cities and places around the world have some sort of, because entrepreneurship and innovation is becoming a really hot topic globally. My thought is, wherever you are, take a look and see what sort of innovation incubators or accelerators are there, and introduce yourself. Because a lot of times, every city around the world pretty much has the same problems. That's, whether you're in Lima, whether you're in, Kazakhstan somewhere, whether you're in, Norfolk, Virginia, or Boulder, Colorado, there are little differences, but most of the problems are pretty much the same. So it's totally possible to come up with an innovation down in Caracas or down wherever that has the potential to go global. So by connecting in with, an innovation hub or an incubator or an entrepreneurial group at university or whatever, you'll start learning how you put those things together and find out, hey, is this a solution that's going to provide value to the world? And if it is, then, you can find the means to take it forward. You might work on the technical side. You might find a friend who wants to do the business and communication side. So you form a little team and you try to do something. Maybe you start a little business, who knows? From an innovation side, what we always tell folks is, most businesses fail, but that's really okay. I did that a lot as a kid, but the idea is you keep trying, and you see something, you say, boy, I think I could make that better. And you kind of create a little solution and you take it forward. So that's a way to engage. And look for the incubators, look for the innovation centers, look for the entrepreneurial stuff at university, and join the community.
And, I would add to that, there's certainly a lot of online community and opportunities. I actually have a family member who lives in a rural area of Pennsylvania, and during the pandemic even, he got involved in an international coding event. And here it turned out, they were able to put together some really amazing things. They learned a lot, they were able to translate it. So, there's a lot of resources available also that can be accessed online if maybe you live in a community that doesn't have as many resources, or maybe is landlocked, you still can do water related things. So lots of possibilities there. And even programs like REYES. I mean, there's certainly a lot of us here who can connect that. So that's exactly, take advantage of every opportunity you have.
Well, thank you. I think that's all the time we have right now for questions. And again, you have the contact information for many of our panelists, so feel free to reach out to them. Don't make sure that you take advantage of that opportunity and that offer, because they have a wealth of knowledge and would be happy to listen to your ideas and also perhaps provide some guidance. So on behalf of Old Dominion University and the REYES program planning team, I would like to thank Nancy Grden, Jeremiah Cronin, Matt Smith, and Kevin Spears one more time for joining us today. We will continue to follow the latest development in the maritime innovation ecosystem. And I really hope that this session has served as a dose of inspiration for many in our audience who would like to follow your advice to try to do things better. And hey, who knows, perhaps they'll even be starting an incubator or a startup very soon, wherever they may live. And to our audience, we're really grateful that you're here. So thanks for tuning in. We look forward to you joining our next session today at 1 p.m. where you will learn about audio engineering. Today's session has been recorded, and if you'd like to watch it again and share it with friends, you can access it from our YouTube channel, link from the REYES website at odu.edu/REYES. This concludes our session. Please have a wonderful rest of your day. We look forward to seeing you again here at 1 o'clock for the next REYES session. See you soon, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks again.
Bye-bye.